All right. Looks like we are live and good to go on YouTube. Looks like we are in the process of getting there on Facebook. Welcome in, everyone. Hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. My name is Connor Riley. I'm here with Dog Nation, doing our weekly Tuesday night chats. We are back. We took some time off last week, enjoying the holidays, getting to spend some time with my family. Been a busy week already so far here for Georgia. Talked to defensive coordinator Dan Lanning and some players yesterday. Talked to Todd Monken and JT Daniels today. Ton of news and notes coming out that affect both Georgia for this game coming up against Cincinnati, as well as into the future 2021 to look at there as well. We've got college football playoff games. We've got bowl games. Georgia plays its last game of the regular season on Friday against Cincinnati, 12:30 here in Atlanta. Hopefully Georgia goes out with a win and ends a very difficult season for a number of reasons on a positive note, and can sort of spin things forward to 2021, where hopefully things get back to normal a little bit here. We'll welcome in some commenters. Elite GB, welcome in on YouTube. Jason Bryan Lee, Desmond Smith, Isaac Cruz, welcome in. We'll give everyone about a minute or two before we get up and rolling here on Connor and Coverage. As we said before, a ton of news. Brock Vandagriff wins the state championship yesterday, and then it comes out today he needs surgery on his PCL. JT Daniels, basically any Georgia player that is playing in this bowl game is non-committal about their future right now as far as what that might be. JT Daniels, Jamari Sawyer, Zamir White, Jordan Davis, they all sort of gave the stock answer, hey, we're just focused on Cincinnati right now. We're on to Cincinnati. We'll sort of address that. When it's going to be addressed after the bowl game. I believe January 15th is when decisions have to be made by. And I expect for Georgia, most of those guys to make their decisions all around the same day as we've come to sort of see and expect. Mike Zambezi, good to see you. Jerry Popham, good to see you as well. Hope everyone had a very happy holidays. I had a good Christmas with the family. Looking forward to New Year's. Georgia's going to have a New Year's Day game at 12:30. That'll be fun and exciting. Game against Cincinnati, which from reading the green a little bit here, it has a very different feel than the Sugar Bowl of the past 2 years, where Georgia's not coming off a loss in an SEC championship game where they had a chance, if they won, they'd be into the playoff. This is really, it feels like it's a game where, hey, Georgia can come out, they're playing a good Cincinnati team, a team I think they really respect, and make a statement for 2021. Obviously, a lot of what 2021 entails for Georgia depends on the shoulders of JT Daniels. We got to talk to him today, got to learn a little bit more about his background, how he got to Georgia, as well as what's his sort of interpretations of the offense with Todd Monken, who we also got to talk to this year. JT, again, he came out today, said, yeah, I really only focused on one thing at a time this week. It's Cincinnati. When it was Missouri, it was Missouri. When it was Vanderbilt, it was Vanderbilt until it was canceled. So that's sort of where Daniels is. If I were a betting man, and some of you know I am a betting man, I would say I'd feel pretty comfortable that Daniels is going to come back for a number of reasons. You look at the NFL draft this year. It doesn't really matter how well JT Daniels plays against Cincinnati. He's going to need to go out there and play. It doesn't. There's no number, passing touchdowns, etc., for him, in my opinion, to vault himself into the first round when you have guys like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Kyle Trask. Those are 6 guys that are all going to go ahead of them. And when there's only 32 teams and a lot of them already have quarterbacks, you're pushing yourself into the 3rd, 4th round and going to a situation where you might not be put in a place to succeed right away. Whereas I think if Daniels comes back, he gets another year removed from those 2 knee surgeries. Georgia's going to return all its skill players next year, at least at the wide receiver position. Running back, we'll see what James Cook and Zamir White decide to do. But there's still a ton of talent on this Georgia offense, and he's got the potential, in my opinion, if he does what he did over the last 3 games of this season, if he is able to do that over a full regular season, do it in a game against Clemson, which he'll get to do when they open the season against Georgia next year on September 4th, when they play Florida, if they play in an SEC championship game, I think if he's able to do and show that, he could very easily be the first quarterback taken. So it would not surprise me in the slightest, and I actually do think he'll end up coming back, which is a really big boost to this Georgia program, because if he comes back, it's the first time, and really since Kirby Smart's gotten here, and you probably have to go back to Aaron Murray in either 2012 or 2013, where you had a real confidence that Georgia's passing offense was going to be a strength for a team. And that's what it figures to be next year if JT Daniels comes back. We got to talk to Todd Monken today. He's sort of I think most of us, at least most rational folks, would say that Todd Monken did a good job this first year when you consider everything that he had to deal with. New offense coming in, no spring practice, weird offseason. Jamie Newman was getting starters reps and was going to start the first game of the season against Virginia and I guess Arkansas when the schedule got changed around. He opts out 2.5, 3 weeks before the game. You deal with all that. JT Daniels obviously isn't cleared, and Jamari Sawyer told us today that he was really struggling in preseason camp, just adjusting to the Georgia defense. Stetson Bennett comes out, plays well against Arkansas, plays well against Auburn, had earned the right to start that Alabama game. And the wheels just sort of fall off. Dwan Mathis didn't end up panning out for Georgia. And ultimately, JT Daniels comes in, looks healthy, gets on the field, and shows that, hey, when you have a competent quarterback in this offense, a guy that can hit those open throws, this offense is pretty dangerous. And you saw it even later in the year in the Missouri and the South Carolina games where, yes, like the Mississippi State game, Georgia can rely on passing to win them a game. But really, that passing offense opens up so much for Georgia in the running game. You saw it against South Carolina, 330 yards, I want to say. Saw it against Missouri, over 300 yards rushing there, I believe, as well. So this offense, when it has the right quarterback, and JT Daniels was that this year for Georgia, it opens up a lot of things for what Todd Monken likes to do. And you get him back, you bring back JT Daniels, Jamari Sawyer comes back, say you play him at left guard, which I think you might see on Friday. You bring back, even if Zamir White and James could go, and we don't really know where they're leaning at this point, but you bring back Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh, Dijon Edwards, who've all looked good in spurts this year when asked. So I think there's a lot of confidence. I do think we'll see some form of spring practice this year for Georgia, which is also going to be big. What GA looks like, I don't know what all it looks like, but I do think we're at a spot to where we've at least shown that we can hold practices and get that benefit of that. And hopefully next September, I don't know what the laws will be in terms of allowing fans into the stadium. Those are going to be determined by states individually. But hopefully September 4th, when Georgia and Clemson are set to play next year, it's in a packed crowd there in Charlotte. Vaccines are rolling out. I had another doctor friend today, got his first round of vaccine. So, hopefully this is the last game where I'm watching it at home and we're doing Zoom press conferences, and hopefully, we get through a 2020 year where Todd Monken, and this is my show, so I don't mind saying this, he just says, hey, shit happens sometimes. And that's a very, I think, apropos way to describe what happened in 2020, both with this Georgia offense and really the year as a whole with where everything could be. So I do think that with JT, again, he comes back, he opens up so much for this offense. And even, I don't even know how well he played against Missouri, but the counting stats, 16-27, 299 yards and 3 touchdowns. George Pickens comes back. The talent and potential is there for JT, I think, to really make a big step up and potentially be the first overall quarterback taken. And tradition has shown in recent NFL drafts, if you're the first quarterback taken, you're probably also the first pick taken. So it is certainly an understandable risk for Daniels to come back next year, especially given his injury history. I don't know how many of you were watching the Cheez-It Bowl right now on ESPN, but Miami's Derek King just suffered looks to be a pretty bad knee injury, and that sort of, worst case scenario. But comes back, he's another year healthy. I think there's some real encouraging moments there from that Georgia offense. And Todd Monken himself said multiple times he is excited about the future of this Georgia offense. I'm guessing he probably knows that that's where JT is leaning right now in terms of coming back. And if he's excited, I think that really warrants a lot of the fan excitement that we see going forward there. One other quick quarterback note I want to touch on before we probably dive a little bit deeper into this game against Cincinnati. Brock Vandagriff wins the state championship yesterday, completes his revenge tour, as some of you know, and he had sort of talked about. It had been known for a little while that he had suffered a PCL injury. It was in the 4th week of the season. Played through the season on it, 47 passing touchdowns, 16 rushing touchdowns. Wins his school's first title, wins it with his dad as his head coach. Met with Ron Corson this morning. They're going to chart out a plan of action for that to get fixed up. To give you the best contextual sense of what the next couple of months would look like for him there, remember when we were talking about JT Daniels in August and September, and Daniels was cleared to practice, but he was not cleared for games. I imagine this spring you probably see that same designation from Vandegrift, where he's able to do some stuff in practice. He's able to go out there and throw around, obviously not take any hits. Will he be cleared to play in Georgia's G-Day spring game? If I had to guess, probably not, and you don't even really want to risk it with that. They're going to want to be precautious with this. And if JT Daniels comes back, you don't need Brock Vandegrift at all next year. And I think the world of Brock Vandegrift. I think he's a talented quarterback. I've written over and over again. I think he is the future of the quarterback position here for Georgia. The Bulldogs don't really look like they're going to land a big name in that 2022 recruiting cycle, especially now that South Carolina has announced it's going to keep Mike Bobo around as the offensive coordinator. I think that's very telling for what Gunnar Stockton ultimately decides to do, along with Connor Shaw staying there as well in an off-field role for South Carolina. So they're making a pretty big investment in Brock Vandegrift. I believe he's the guy for the future of the Georgia program. He won a state title. I've seen him 3-4 times live this season. He's looked great every time he's done it. Obviously, the athletic ability is there, and they really to his dad's credit, they made it a point because in part injury, but before that, to not really rely on his legs and to try to win with the arm, and he did that plenty this past year. 47 touchdown passes. I know some of you out want to throw out his competition level, but look, every time he stepped on the field, he was hands down. He had to be the best player on the field, and he absolutely was every time. And to see him dominate like that, that's perhaps what is most encouraging there. And with Brock's knee being what it is, I think it's an opportunity for Carson Beck as well to sort of say, hey, don't forget about me here. I know Jeff Sentell's spoken very highly of him. Mike Griffith spoke highly of him as well. Won a state title at 7A level down there in Florida, and I think he's clearly a competitor. He's clearly a guy who's got the tools. It'll be interesting to see how he uses the spring, competing along with Stetson Bennett, of course, to sort of make a name for himself and sort of show these Georgia coaches what he has, because he is certainly right now not a name to forget. And Daniels comes back, he's the obvious starter. I think that's great. But what Georgia does at backup next year is interesting, because Stetson Bennett, I know he might not exactly be the most popular person in the world right now, but to have a guy who's won against Arkansas on the road, home against Auburn, Tennessee, at Kentucky, that's a really nice luxury to have a guy you feel confident and comfortable and isn't going to necessarily be afraid of the moment. So to have that as a backup, and then how Beck and Vandegrift both develop next year, I think is going to be really interesting. So I've seen a bunch of questions about Zamir and James Cook. We don't know yet. I'm not really sure where those guys are leaning. The shelf life of running backs is very small there at the NFL level, so they might want to get out and go start making their earning potential while they still have their bodies with them, and they both have injury histories here at Georgia. But I can't help but also think you look back at Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, those were guys who were probably in pretty similar shoes to what James and Zamir found themselves in right now. They made it a point, hey, we want to come back. We want to be the leaders on this team, the sort of faces of the Georgia program. And they led Georgia as close as you can to a national title without actually winning it. So I do think that might loom heavy on the minds of Zamir and James. And again, if this whole offense decides, hey, let's just bring the band back together next year, this Georgia team could certainly, in my opinion, be the best team in the country to start the season, especially when you factor in what Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, the other sort of elite talented teams all stand to lose there. So what Zamir, obviously JT is number one. I think Jordan Davis is number two in terms of guys that we don't really know where they're leaning right now. If they come back, that's a huge win for Georgia. And then Zamir and James are both there at number three, because as much as we like Kenny McIntosh, as much as we like Kendall Milton, Zamir White is still Georgia's best running back, and he's gotten better over the course of this season. And another full off season, another year removed from his knee injury, I'd be really encouraged with what we see from him. And James Cook, he's a real weapon. You saw that against Alabama. You've seen it in times this year where he's just a dynamic playmaker, and Georgia doesn't really have anyone else like him on the roster. We've hit about the 14, 15-minute mark here on Connor and coverage. We'll answer some of your questions later. Talked about quarterbacks, Todd Monken off the top. We'll change gears and move into previewing the Sugar Bowl here in terms of not the Sugar Bowl. I've made that mistake too many times this week. The Peach Bowl. Georgia plays in the Peach Bowl. They play Cincinnati at 12:30 on ESPN on Friday. This is the first of three Power 5 games that will be played that day. The latter two are the college football playoff games, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State. It'll be a full day of college football, one of the best days of the year if you're a college football man, or a college football fan, I should say. And Georgia-Cincinnati, it's a game where I believe Cincinnati has Georgia's full attention. They know that Georgia can come out and make a statement in this game. and show that, hey, we're one of the best teams in the country. And while, yes, we didn't look our best against Florida and Alabama, we're still clearly right up there, deserving to be mentioned as one of the elite programs in college football, because since it's as good a case to make as anyone this year, they were the fourth best team in college football. I know Notre Dame ended up getting in. Texas A&M, Notre Dame, you can sift between the two of who should have gotten in. I think Cincinnati, there's a case to be made, given you look at their statistical profile. They're number one in yards. They're the number one defense in terms of yards per play allowed. They are the number 11 offense in terms of yards per play, number 15 scoring offense. They have talent. They've recruited a couple of blue chippers over the years. Luke Fickell's a guy who's going to be a Power 5 head coach before long. Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator, is someone who I think could very well be LSU's next defensive coordinator. There's a lot of talent in the Cincinnati program. Except for really Tulsa, they ran through every team that they had played there in that American Athletic Conference, which is a good football conference. So it's an interesting game. Desmond Ridder is an athletic quarterback. It'll be interesting to see what Georgia does against him, how they go out and try to slow him down, especially, you look defensively, Monty Rice won't be playing. Eric Stokes won't be playing. One thing to look for in this Peach Bowl is what they do at cornerback. I think there's a chance that they could go put Tyreek Stevenson out there. I think he's the guy that I'm really most interested in seeing in this Georgia secondary. I know there have been some questions out there on that in terms of what it looks like. Mark Webb, Kirby had said he was going to play. We'll see about that. DJ Daniel had previously been mentioned as a guy who had reportedly opted out, but Kirby never really clarified him. Secondary, Georgia's going to lose a lot anyway next year, and I think this will be a nice little preview for what you have back there. Does Tyson Campbell ultimately decide to come back? We don't know quite there yet. Lewis Seen, Christopher Smith will be your two starting safeties next year, but I'll be really interested what Georgia does with Tyreek Stevenson in this game and where they choose to play him, because he's a guy who, Kirby said it after the Florida game, he's got as good ball skills as anyone on this team, and you've seen him been used as a defensive weapon before. Everyone remembers the big sack he had against Auburn as a freshman, but he might just be better as a pure cornerback than necessarily as a safety playmaker who can go out and do some of the things that you saw Richard LeCounte go out and do last year. So I think it'll be interesting to see what he does. And admittedly, Tyreek probably hadn't had the year that he thought he was going to, but you maybe move him to corner where he's probably a little bit more natural for him. And I'll be excited to sort of see what he does in that game. The front seven, if Jordan Davis and Devontae White and Julian Rochester are two other guys who have been mentioned as possibly coming back, I'll be really, really interested to see what that front seven looks like next year. Because it's going to be, if those three guys come back on the defensive line, and even if they don't, Georgia's still going to have a very good front seven. Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall at the middle linebacker position. Azeez Ojulari is almost certainly going pro after this game. He's a guy who's been now mentioned as a first-round draft pick. I think that'll be sort of interesting and fun to watch his development continue. And Nolan Smith is a guy who's going to play a lot next year. Adam Anderson is a guy who's going to play a lot. Does MJ Sherman take more snaps in this game? I think this Georgia defense front seven, while it might not necessarily be as deep as it was this year, I still think it has a case to be every bit as talented as it was this past season in 2021. And the Cincinnati offense is pretty good. Statistically, it's closer to what Alabama and Florida are than what really the rest of the conference foes that Georgia played this year. So it'll be a nice little challenge. They've got some good wide receivers. Kirby Smart spoke very highly of them. I think he said their wide receivers, other than Alabama, they were the only team that really had comparable wide receivers to Cincinnati. So it'll sort of be interesting there with what Georgia ultimately, how they play in this game defensively against a good Cincinnati offense. And I think this is a fun game. It's a game that Cincinnati's obviously going to go out and try to make a statement. The last two times a group of five teams played a Power 5 team in this bowl game, the group of five team has won. Auburn very famously lost to UCF, an unbeaten AAC champion, in the 2018 game. So I think this Georgia team is well aware of that history, and they know that you don't want to be the butt of a joke. You want to go out and make a statement and say, Cincinnati, get them out of here. We are a legitimate team. We are one of the best teams in college football. And I think potentially use this game as a statement to say, hey, we're coming for you guys next year, even though I don't expect whatever happens in this bowl game to have a big transfer of momentum, especially when Georgia opens its season next year against Clemson and Charlotte. So a lot to look forward to there. Quick college playoff notes. Alabama's just – they're going to roll Notre Dame. Alabama, I've said it for weeks now, this is the best team in college football. Print the shirts. They're going to win, I guess, their 18th or 19th national title, depending on how many they actually choose to count. This offense is just incredible at all levels: offensive line, running back, wide receiver. I think Devontae Smith, he'd get my Heisman vote. Mac Jones has obviously been incredible. Najee Harris has a case to be the best running back in the country. I will say, if they play Clemson in the title game, the Landon Dickerson injury looms rather large, because there's a case to be made. He was maybe the best center in college football this year, and losing him is a sneaky big loss there for them. So I think should they play Clemson, that'll be interesting. Second game, Ohio State, Clemson. Ohio State, I think they pretty obviously have the talent to be one of the best 4 teams in the country. As Mike Griffith will never let me forget, very famously said, if Ohio State didn't play this year, sort of be a hollow national championship. Well, their playoff bid, ironically, feels a little hollow. They only play 6 games. They really, against the 2 teams with winning records, Northwestern and Indiana, they don't look all that impressive in those games. Justin Fields in particular, I know he's dealing with a thumb injury right now. He 3 interceptions against Indiana, less than 50, was I believe 10 of 27 against Northwestern. This Clemson defense is figured to be really good. Clemson should win this game. I'm probably picking them to do so. But again, with just the raw talent that Ohio State has, it wouldn't surprise me to see them come out and win this game and, maybe shake off the webs. But, maybe this is just an Ohio State team that, because of the way COVID has impacted them, because of the way the Big Ten set up their schedule to where they weren't very flexible and they wanted to cancel this. And they actually did cancel the season, and I think really to the detriment of just about every team in that league this year. You look at Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin. Traditionally, those are the 3 most talented teams behind Ohio State, and all of them finished the season with losing records. So you wonder where that puts you as a conference there. And ultimately, I believe they all came back to get Ohio State in the playoff, and I don't really know how much those schools ended up helping Ohio State this season. So, Hank Majors, appreciate you, the kind words. James Leonard Brown, Ohio State 31-28 in an upset. I like that pick there. Questions, comments. We go about another 10 minutes here. Did my little playoff spiel there. Let's see. Clarence Davis, we need Adam Anderson back next year. I think it's very interesting what he does. Obviously, Jermaine Johnson transfers to Florida State to get more playing time, and you figure that with the way he's used, Adam Anderson, look, he's just never going to put on the weight that we've all been saying he's going to since college started. But it's clear he's a great pass rusher. He gets after the quarterback. And he's got the athletic ability, I think, to drop back into coverage. Whether he's as good as Jermaine Johnson is, that'll be interesting to see. But he's a guy who, Jermaine Johnson leaves, I think that opens up a lot more playing time for Adam Anderson next year. And, quite frankly, obviously the depth won't be the same next season, but I don't know how big a drop-off there is if you're going from Jermaine Johnson, Azeez Ojulari this year to Adam Anderson and Nolan Smith next year. I think those guys bring a lot of the same attributes to what those first 2 names did. So, well, obviously, again, depth will be interesting. They're going to ask a lot more from NJ Sherman next year. And Chaz Chambliss as well, another guy that is coming into this program. Maybe he plays Xavier Sori at one of those outside linebacker positions. It'll be interesting to see there. Jermaine Dunbar asked a very good question. Where do you see UGA rank going into its first game next season? So I think they're going to win. And I think the media and pollsters, they will have Georgia given what – and I am projecting that JT Daniels comes back, Jordan Davis comes back. If those 2 guys come back, Georgia wins against Cincinnati. I believe Georgia will open next year as the number 2 team in college football. I think Clemson's going to be number 1, just given what DJ Uiagalelei did, especially against Notre Dame in that one game, and sort of the defensive talent they bring back as well. And I think Georgia's going to be number 2, and that theoretically sets up a 1-versus-2 showdown to open the season. And I think that'll factor into it as well. I remember a few years ago, Florida State and Alabama, they were either 1-2 or 2-3. I think, and that might not have been the second and third best team in that Florida State team. Only won 7 games that year, but it was sort of a nice narrative to build to in the offseason. Whereas, and really the other reason I have Georgia as high as I do them, we know now that offense wins you games in college football, wins you championships in college football. Ohio State is going to lose Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, Alex Leatherwood, Landon Dickerson, and as well as a few other starters, and Dylan Moses on defense, a couple of Patrick Surtain on defense. Ohio State's going to lose most of their offensive line. Justin Fields, Trey Sermon, Chris Olave. That's a good chunk of their offense. Clemson's going to lose Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Mari Rogers, Corlin Powell, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name there. So these teams are going to lose quite a bit of their own offensive firepower and they've all recruited well. Georgia, with Daniels coming back, they have the proven production. And defensively, yeah, Georgia loses a lot of its secondary, but hey, you can't look at me straight in the face and tell me that these teams are really concerned about defense this year when the final score of the SEC championship game was 52-46. And Georgia still got talent on there. They still finished first in the SEC in yards per play allowed, and that's with playing both Alabama and Florida. So it'll be interesting for me to sort of see how these teams go about and ultimately finish out the season. But right now, I think Georgia can absolutely enter next season as a top 3, top 2 team in the country. And based on what they bring on offense, I might put them at number 1 personally. But let's see. Tennessee. Kathy Caver Green asks, any thoughts on DeAndre Johnson entering the transfer portal? Tennessee's best pass rusher. He enters the portal. I don't think Georgia's a destination there. I think they're going to look for maybe some more help on the offensive side of the ball and then in the secondary as well. I don't think they necessarily need another linebacker. But that's pretty telling for Tennessee because, look, Jeremy Pruitt needs to win a lot next year because Hugh Freeze is still going to be a candidate for that job. And it's year 4 there, and he doesn't have any more excuses. He never should have blamed Rich Jones in the first place. I don't think it's great for you to blame your predecessor. And then he just hasn't really helped that program take the step forward that you need. So Tennessee, again, they need to win a lot of games next year. I don't know if – and again, they play Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. You're not going to win all 3 of those games. Can they steal one of those games? We'll see. Jeremy Pruitt might need to, along with winning – the rest of his games, which he hasn't always proven he's capable of doing. So, let's see. Yeah, Jerry Dogs fan brings up one other thing. Georgia's not installing a new offense this offseason. Todd Monken will be back. I thought he did some really good things in terms of getting playmakers open this year. So, I am excited to see what this offense continues to develop under Todd Monken. And you can watch the video and interview we had with him today. You can tell he's very much not from the Kirby Smart, Nick Saban school of press conferences where, keeps cards close to the vest, doesn't really say a whole lot. He has no problem telling you exactly how he feels on some things. And I just really appreciate that as a media member to just sort of call it like it actually is. Let's see. Andrew Allgood, who do you think Georgia will go after in the portal? Or at least what position? So, obviously, Arik Gilbert is a name I'm not going to skirt around there. There have been rumblings that he's going to enter there from LSU. I think the interesting thing to watch there is the timing of it because Georgia is obviously – they have 16 guys enrolling early and getting all those guys on scholarship and making sure you have enough departures to sort of match and get to that 85 number, I think is going to be very important. If he goes into the portal, he's a good enough player to absolutely do that and to go after and bring into your team. I know Tank Bigsby, Brandon talked about him a little bit today and sort of the rumors based off an Instagram post. I won't go quite as far to say he's in the portal, but he's another guy who maybe you do go after and at least for those that have listened to me and Jeff Sintel, the backstory on his recruitment is well documented. He come to Georgia. Georgia didn't necessarily show him the love. They wanted him to wait and sort of see what Zach Evans was going to do. He chose to go play at Auburn. Georgia went down the road with Evans, got Evans, and then ultimately told him no thanks. So it'll be interesting to sort of see what that relationship like is there. I think maybe you really only go after Bigsby if both Cook and Zamir White both leave next year. But then you've also got guys like Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards, Kenny McIntosh. And one thing, both those guys, and DeAndre Johnson as well, the name we mentioned a little bit earlier, both those guys are within SEC transfers. And as currently states, while it looks like the NCAA is going to repeal their transfer rule where you have to sit out a year from transferring, I don't think the SEC right now is looking forward to repealing that transfer sort of rule where within conference you have to sit out a year. Now, obviously, that rule got waived this year, citing, as Greg Sankey cited, the unprecedented nature of the pandemic. But I'm not 100% certain that rule is jumping to get changed. I know Kirby Smart is not necessarily in favor of waiving that rule just on general principle, but maybe he changes his tune if it's clearly willing to benefit the Georgia program, which if it's guys like Arik Gilbert and guys like Tank Bigsby, you absolutely do that. I would say if there's one position that you probably do need to maybe go out and bring, if Tyson Campbell leaves in addition to Eric Stokes, you maybe really do go out and look for a cornerback position. I know Keely Ringo is a name. I wrote about him this week. I don't know if he's necessarily a corner or sort of you put him in that star money position. We're learning a lot about Tyreek Stevenson this week as well. Is he a corner or a star position? So what Tyson Campbell does, I think, really makes it interesting to see Georgia. Like, hey, we might need to go out and get a corner that at least has starting experience. Because if both Campbell and Stokes leaves, DJ Daniel is gone. You don't really have anyone on your team that has started at either of those cornerback positions. So I know Keely Ringo was highly recruited, Tyreek Stevenson as well, Jalen Kimber, Amir Speed, and then Darren Branch. Those are sort of the names to know right now. And then they bring in Nyland Green. There's a lot of highly recruited names, but they haven't done anything. And sometimes having that experience, especially at the cornerback position, I think can be very, very valuable. Let's see. Rich, there's no need to be a jerk. I know that must be hard for you, but let's see. Comments, questions. We've gone about 31 minutes here. Brian Kephart, I like this. Starting secondary, what does it look like game one against Clemson? So I'm going to assume here that Tyson Campbell goes pro, and I'm not going to speculate on if a corner comes in and who that might be. I will say the starting safeties are easy. I think it's Lewis Cine and Chris Smith, again, who've been sort of the starters since the Kentucky game, seen all this year, and Smith sort of came in for Richard LeCounte. At corner, I think you're going to see Tyreek Stevenson, at least to start the year. I think they're going to play him there. I think they're going to put Keely Ringo at star, and you're deciding between a Jalen Kimber, who is good, who Jeff Sentell sort of raved about and was going to be a guy who just needs a year to get in the strength and conditioning program to bulk up a little bit. But I think maybe to start the year, given all the inexperience, maybe you do see a guy like Amir Speed to start there. So the corners will be Amir Speed, Tyreek Stevenson, Keely Ringo at star, Lewis Cine, and Chris Smith as your safeties right there. Let's see. Comments, questions, thoughts. So let's see. Anything else before we head out there? Patrick Nicholson asked, why would Jordan Davis stay? What's the upside? So the argument I would make there is, so Jordan Davis is obviously, I think he is the best player on Georgia's defense. And the reason he might not go pro necessarily is the position that he plays. He's really a zero technique. He's still going to be the best player a year from now, and there's not a whole lot of real draft value for him. So why not stay an extra year, maybe see what Georgia does with you extra when you know that you're still sort of going to be the same player you are for a year from now. Now, obviously, that can be used as the same reason to make an argument against him going, but he could also be someone who really likes the college environment. I think is you heard him on an interview this week on Dog Nation YouTube. You can go watch that. He's a guy that I think really enjoys the college experience. He's a clear leader for this Georgia team. And if he comes back sort of like Richard LeCounte did last year, I think he can sort of fill that role and be sort of the face of the Georgia defense where he's the unquestioned best player, even if, statistically it might not always show up there. So that's probably a reason why I think he would come back, sort of same like Richard LeCounte a year ago. And maybe you continue to build off that, become an All-American, and sort of build from there and show that, hey, like bar none, you're the best defensive lineman in college football, even if, you're not necessarily racking up sacks or tackles for loss. So Jason Bryan Lee, we'll get out of here on this. Is Richard LeCounte cleared yet? If not, when we know game time. Kirby Smart had said it is about a 50-50 chance that he ends up playing this week. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like a DeAndre Swift situation was last year where he gets in for maybe one or two plays and that's it. Just because all that Richard, I think, he's given to this program, I think he was clearly on his way to an All-American season, probably even SEC Defensive Player of the Year prior to that injury and traffic accident. And I think he's someone who has made a clear effort to come back to get healthy. And I do think that in a way, Georgia wants to reward him without necessarily putting him at full risk. So, even if it is only for one or two games, I think that'd be really cool. So, with that, Clarence Dawson explains zero technique. Zero technique, essentially, you are lining up directly on the center. And your job is to necessarily cover the multiple gaps. And the way Georgia uses Jordan Davis, they're not necessarily telling their defensive linemen to say, hey, just beat the offensive lineman in front of you and go tackle the ball carrier, because that can be a little bit risky sometimes. what they're telling Jordan Davis to do more often than not is, hey, hold up 2 blockers, hold up multiple blockers. That way we can allow our linebackers to go make plays either behind the line of scrimmage or close to it. And Jordan Davis does that better than absolutely anybody. So that's sort of the way Jordan Davis is more often than not used in this defense. So Kathy Green, I agree. I want to see Richard McCown out there one last time, just for all that he's meant to this Georgia program. So with that, we'll get out of here. My name is Connor Riley. We've got Before the Hedges tomorrow night with Jeff Santel. He's been covering the state championship games. This week, he's going to have some good intel. He was with, in his words, the top prospect for Georgia in the 2022 recruiting class today. You can make sure to check that out. We're going to have Cover 4 and I believe Go With The Flow on Thursday. Georgia plays Cincinnati on Friday at noon. That'll be worth watching. We're going to have tons of coverage from that game as well. Georgia's last game of the season, I did not think we'd get to this point. Obviously, Georgia lost the game against Vanderbilt, but hey, 10 games, a bowl game, top 10 ranking if they win this game. The development of the offense, it's been as good a season as you can ask for. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We're still going to do these in the offseason, which starts next week, unfortunately. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Dog Nation Daily is officially back as well every Monday through Friday. So glad to have Brandon back. If you have a chance, check out his podcast post on the Dog Nation homepage from yesterday. Really kind words written about his dad, who unfortunately passed away at the beginning of December. Just really great words. Glad to have him back. Dog Nation has his voice back, and I couldn't be more proud of it. My name is Connor Riley. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.